Next week's presentation. Tran Dang, she's given this presentation before, it's a great presentation. America's children displaced and disadvantaged in Mexico. Amid an economic downturn, mass deportations, and intensifying anti-immigrant sentiment in the United States, Mexican migrants have been forced to return to Mexico, and their US-born family members have emigrated with them. The arrival of these Americans has contributed to an extraordinary growth of the US population in Mexico, now home to more than 600,000 American children. While these children struggle to adapt to a new language, country, and education system, they are losing language and cultural ties to the United States. We know the vast majority plan to return home one day, but will they be prepared? So join us next week to hear from Tran about what she's learned from in-depth interviews about America's children in Mexico and what her organization, the Rhizome Center for Migrants, is doing to ensure their future. Now, Tran Dang is the founder and executive director of the Rhizome Center for Migrants. Tran is a former large law firm attorney who has represented victims of persecution in regional human rights forums and systems. Before moving to Mexico, where she currently resides, she directed a human rights office and legal aid clinic in Bangkok, Thailand. And in 2018, she founded the Rhizome Center for Migrants, a US non-profit providing post-deportation legal advocacy and reintegration support to the returned and deported community in Western Central America. So the Rhizome Center for Migrants is an independent, secular, non-profit organization, and their on-the-ground project in Guadalajara supports deported and returned migrants through legal aid and advocacy. And today the Rhizome Center is a leading voice on binational issues impacting the deported and their family. It's a great talk. I don't know whether you've seen it before, but it's a wonderful talk, and it's a subject that we don't really hear much about. That's very important. Now, this week, David Greenstein. Greenstein or Greenstein? Greenstein, of course, right? The Innocence Project, wrongly convicted. This is both frightening and fascinating. Real stories of real people who have been freed by the Innocence Project, including some in Mexico. Now, David used to give this talk as part of Enrichment Lectures on the Royal Caribbean cruises, and it was always voted one of the top 10 best speeches of onboard activities. So you're in for a great presentation this week. So please give a warm open circle welcome to David Greenstein.
Thank you. Nicer than what I deserve, but what can I tell you? One of the things that I love when I speak at LCS and I speak at Open Circle is that I can use names like Groucho Marx and you'll know who I'm talking about. On the ship, I spent 9 years with Royal Caribbean until the pandemic came. I say something like Groucho Marx or as, oh. Anyway, I am going to tell you about the Innocence Project. It's frightening and it's fascinating. Now, you might have heard of Sherman Billingsley's Stork Club. Any nods? Okay, theory, okay. Well, that was a long time ago, and what happened was, in 1953, Philip Emmanuel Balestrero was a musician there. Nice guy, family man, and all of that. His wife had an impacted wisdom tooth. Needed money, so he went to the company that has his insurance, and he said, I want to take a loan on my policy. They all looked at him, 3 women there, and they said, well, come back tomorrow. We'll have it all set up for you. He came back the next day. The police were there to arrest him. Why? These 3 women looked at him and said, he's the guy that was in here and robbed us 2 weeks ago. So man, he got arrested. That was it? 3 eyewitnesses. I mean, eyewitnesses. Can you do any better than that? And he's going to trial. And it's pretty darn sure that he's going to be convicted. But what happens was a juror made a comment. And the comment was heard by the other jurors, and the judge says, mistrial, we're going to start all over again. He had borrowed money. Manny had borrowed money to get an attorney. And Sherman Billingsley, who believed in him, kept paying him, and he came in and all of that. Well, while they were waiting for the trial, the second one, his wife suffered a breakdown and was institutionalized. Before the trial started, guess what? They caught the right man. That means anybody can be mistaken. All right. Oh, by the way, when I give this talk on ships, it's 2 parts. And for the second part, which is a story, I usually wear an orange prison jumpsuit with Department of Corrections on the back of it. And I have it, and I was going to do it today, and then I thought, wait a minute, this is Mexico, we got a cop, and I'm on my ATV. And I said, okay, I'm not, when I do pirates, I dress up like a pirate, but I'm not going to do the prison outfit here. Anyway, our players, we got the police. Police are out on the street, and I'm talking basically the information I have here is from the United States and to a degree from Canada. The police are to keep peace. If they see a person committing a crime, they arrest that person. The 2 factors, has a crime been committed, and does it look like this guy did it? In this case, they'll bring him in. They will then bring him in to the supervisor. The supervisor looks all the information over. That's a supervisor at the police department. And he or she says, has a crime been committed? Yes. From what the officer put, does it look like this guy might have done it? Yes. Okay, now it gets passed over to the detectives. The detectives look at it, and they're looking for the same 2 factors. Crime committed? Yeah. Does it look like this guy did it? Yeah, pretty much. Now it goes to the DDA, Deputy District Attorney. This is the man or woman who decides if they're going to file the charges. So they look at it and they say, was a crime committed? Yeah. Does it look like this guy did it? Yeah. But now there's a third element. Do I think I can get a conviction? That's the most important element for the Deputy District Attorney. Can I get a conviction? And if they don't think they can get it, they won't file it. This is why so many rape cases are never filed. He said, she said, prove it. That is one of the problems there. Now, I want you to understand something. A lot of times, people are charged with something and they are innocent. Now, what is the difference between innocent and not guilty? Same thing? No. The difference is not guilty means that the state has not been able to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Innocence means the person had nothing to do with it at all. No connection, not even in the same zip code. That is the difference. And that's why this is called the Innocence Project. Now, sometimes there are guilty people that get away. And sometimes there are innocent people who will plead guilty. Why would an innocent person plead guilty? I'll tell you why. Their attorney will tell them there's no guarantee what a jury's going to do. They're offering you a deal. Take the deal. And they get scared. I wouldn't get scared. Doesn't matter if you're innocent or guilty. And they plead guilty. Now at this point, I want to read you something by one of my absolute favorite attorneys. The business of law is not an ethical arena. It's an ugly world where underhandedness is often celebrated. Our legal system, both civil and criminal, is adversarial by nature, where it is often the very function of a lawyer's job to prevent the truth from ever coming out. Where attorneys will overbill their own clients, where they'll create work, and sometimes where judges will even turn a blind eye to this. A lot of times defense attorneys get paid to suppress and squash and conceal evidence, to pervert and disgrace the rules for the purpose of getting the bad guy off. That's the adversarial part of the whole thing. Remember, this is the same system that freed O.J. Simpson and put Reuben Hurricane Carter in prison, who was later proven to be not guilty. Every first-year law student is taught, don't ever, ever equate the law and justice, because sometimes it is mutually exclusive. And by the way, the attorney that said that, his name is Alan Shore. Anybody ever heard of Alan Shore? The practice. Right. Okay. Our guy is now a defendant. And let's say he gets convicted. You can get convicted pretty easy if you've got eyewitnesses. Gee, let me tell you, that is a slam dunk case. There's also a couple of other things you may not know. One, there is a 13th juror. You think it's only 12? No. In the United States, there's a 13th juror. And who is that juror? That's the judge. What happens is, if a person is convicted, but the judge, who often knows more than the jury ever gets to hear, if the judge feels that no reasonable jury, knowing all of the facts, would have convicted that person, the judge can turn that conviction around to not guilty. But it doesn't work if the person is found innocent and the judge knows he was guilty. The judge can't change that innocent verdict. Another interesting fact. Probably everybody who ever watches TV and sees police shows has heard, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you, blah, blah, blah. You know that one, right? In Canada, they don't have that. There's no Miranda rule. Nothing at all. As the Canadian Supreme Court said, there is no place in our earth, in Canada, for that rule. That is one big difference. Now, I also want to tell you about what is called jury nullification. This 97-year-old man murdered, as a matter of law, his 94-year-old wife, who had cancer and dementia, who had pleaded with him for days, weeks, and months, please, let me out of this. And so he did. And he was arrested for murder. It was technically murder. And the jury hears the whole story. Guilty as sin. And they find him not guilty. Jury nullification. That's called justice in the eyes of many. I'll leave it up to you to decide which way it goes. All right. The person is now convicted, our defendant. It isn't over there. We now have a pre-sentence hearing. What should we do with this guy? Probation officer comes in. You also get victim impact statement, where the victims or families get up to testify how this has affected us. All the things that the judge should know, or at least they believe. The court then passes sentence. It ain't near over yet, particularly in death penalty cases, because there are motions that they made and were denied, motions that the defense said, exclude this evidence, throw the case out, put a gag order. Anything the court rules on can be appealed later. And that takes a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Well, the guy gets, or the woman, gets convicted. All the appeals have gone. That's the end of it. Now is when the Innocence Project comes in. It is dedicated to correcting the mistakes that the system made. The Innocence Project has nothing at all to do with the government. And they are also not looking for technical mistakes. They are looking for innocence. Remember, I told you the difference. It started in New York. 1992 at Cardozo School of Law at Yeshiva University. Peter Neufeld and Barry Schenck, both of them against the death penalty. How do cases get referred to the Innocence Project? I mean, almost everybody says they're not guilty. Sometimes the prisoner will write a letter and explain the situation. Sometimes judges will refer the Innocence Project and have the people go there. Remember, the judge knows more than the jury hears. Okay? Public defenders will do it because the guy was wrongfully convicted. And believe it or not, sometimes prosecutors who have won the case, they will contact the Innocence Project. How could they contact the Innocence Project when they did their job? They got the guy convicted because it was their job to win. But they knew that the guy might be innocent. It's an adversarial thing. They're not looking for justice, they're looking for winning. That's the way it goes. All right. Public defenders are under a lot of pressure, and sometimes they just tell the people, confess, you'll only get 6 months, they'll give you probation. Now, DNA. DNA changed the whole picture of this. How accurate is DNA? 95.007% accurate. Is DNA enough to convict somebody or get them released? No, because there is a margin for error. So there has to be something else. These are the things, again, that the Innocence Project works on. You cannot imagine, I hope you never have to or could understand what it is to be wrongfully convicted of a crime. You know you didn't do it, but nobody believes you. Nobody listens. Anyway, the original Innocence Project now only works with DNA. There are Innocence Projects all around the world, including about 2 years ago, the Innocence Project in Mexico had a man released that had been found guilty, and the system was closed. And if you go to Google and look it up, you'll see, just put Innocence Project Mexico. They're all over the free world. They have found physical proof that the guy didn't do it. Like I say, they're not looking for something technical. The ones that are looking for wrongful convictions, they have paperwork and paperwork and paperwork all over the place. They look for falsified evidence. Remember the big furor about Detective Furman in the O.J. case? Have cops ever been found to have not been the most upstanding? Yeah. The original Innocence Project now only works with DNA. The others, they go through the paperwork, they find witnesses that weren't brought in. The scary part, the really scary part of this whole thing is that they have found people innocent that were on death row. They were going to be executed, and they had nothing whatsoever to do with the crime. But they were going to be executed. Now, one of my favorite parts is I get to tell you a story. It's a story of Jennifer Thompson and Ronald Cotton. It was in 1984. Jennifer was a early 20-something student in college. One night, she wakes up to find a man in her bedroom with a knife. He wasn't there making a social call. He was there to rape her. She knew that there was nothing she could do. No way could she get out of it. But Jennifer was pretty smart. She said, okay, in her mind, I'll go along with this. She somehow got the guy to turn a light on in the room. And she looked at him, and she said in her mind, I am going to memorize everything. I will identify this man. He won't get away with it. But again, she knew she couldn't avoid it. She offered him a cup of coffee. He had raped her. Ultimately, she was able to get out the back door and go to a neighbor. The neighbor took care of her. She went to the police. She was shown a photo lineup. One of the men in that lineup was Ronald Cotton. Now, Ronald Cotton was not a saint. He had had a few brushes with the law. Nothing major. She looked at the picture and said, that's him. They brought 5 guys in that looked all similar, and Ron Cotton was one of them. She picked him out. That's it. Now we've got a trial going. Ron is the defendant, and Jennifer is the witness, the victim. Do you see the man that raped you in this courtroom? Yes. Who is it? Let the record indicate she's pointed to the defendant, Ron Cotton. That's it. He is in prison. Life sentence. In prison, there's another guy named Bobby Poole. Bobby Poole looked very much like Ron Cotton. In fact, so much that sometimes the guards would even mistake them. Hey, Cotton, get over here. I'm Bobby. Well, at some point, Ron heard about DNA testing, and he got tested. But they didn't get the results back immediately. But what did happen is that Bobby Poole had been going around that prison saying, hey, guess what? Ron's doing my time. I'm the one that committed the rape. Well, on appeal, the court found a mistake that the court made. The upper court found a mistake that the lower court made. Ron gets a new trial. And he says, this time I want Bobby Poole there. I want him sitting in that front row. They got it. Jennifer gets up on the stand. You see the man here who raped you? Yes, him. But the record indicates she identified Ron Cotton. No question. Back to jail, back to prison for the rest of his life. The DNA comes back. The DNA shows it was not Ron Cotton. Who was it? Our old friend, Bobby Poole. He was the one that did it. They get together, the defense attorneys get together with the district attorney and said, let's ask the judge for an acquittal. And they go to Jennifer, and Jennifer said, he's the one. I saw him. She would not believe it. But the deputy district attorney and the defense attorney, they went to the judge, and the judge reversed the conviction and let Ron go. It took Jennifer 2 years before she could accept that she was wrong. She was devastated what she had done. It was a legitimate mistake. At the end of 2 years, she said she wanted to meet Ron. And they set up a meeting in a church, just the two of them. There was a lot of crying. And Ron looked at her and said 3 of the most important words she had ever heard. He said, I forgive you. And by the way, the reason I know so many of these details is they ended up writing a book called Picking Cotton. And they tell it from both sides. And I bought the book. It was fascinating. It truly was. Today, the families are friends. They have dinner together every so often. And Jennifer, she travels the country giving talks about prison reform and the criminal justice system and the uncertainty of eyewitness reports. Sometimes they travel together. And on occasion, I have to say this because you won't understand the point after. Ron is black. He's a black man. And occasionally someone in that role will say, oh, how did you two meet? And she looks at the person and says, ask him. They didn't say what he says. Anyway, I didn't need notes on that one. There are a couple of other stories. One of them, this is the wrongfully convicted one. Linnell Jeter, his story got on 60 Minutes. And that is how they ended up getting the case reviewed. Another case where in this one, the deputy district attorney had committed prejudicial error. And it was in Texas, by the way, which has no relevance to anything. He was found innocent. Now I want to tell you a story about attorneys and Alton Logan. Alton Logan was knowledgeable of some people who had committed a crime, and in the process of that crime, a security guard was killed. Alton had 2 attorneys. And, no, I'm sorry. The guy that was picked up for the crime had 2 attorneys. He told those attorneys, Alton Logan, who was also picked up and said to be one of our accomplices, he wasn't. I did the murder. Okay. Now that ought to get Alton out real quick, but it couldn't. Why? Attorney-client privilege. That is basically the same as a psychologist and patient, a priest and a penitent. What they hear cannot be told without the permission of their client. They went to judges and got ethics opinions, and they were told, you'll get disbarred. You can't do it. And here's a little catch in the whole thing. If Alton had been sentenced to death, they could have gone and told. Because you can break the attorney-client privilege if there is a life at stake. But Alton's life wasn't at stake. He would stay alive for life in prison. Nothing they could do. So they made declarations, notarized them, put them in a box, and put it under a bed. Finally, when their client died in prison, then they could go to the DA and tell what their client had said. And the thing was, Alton, he had been sentenced to life in prison, so they couldn't do it before. They went to the DA, they told the DA what the story was, and Alton Logan was released. His state had a thing that says, if you're wrongfully convicted, you can make a claim. He got something like $100,000. Ron Cotton got $110,000 for the 10 years that he spent there. Other states have that same deal, but some of them don't. These are scary stories. The Innocence Project is literally a lifesaver for many. But what happens to these people that get released? Is there when it hits the headlines and there's a crime, everybody reads about it. Front page, second page, all the gory details. You think there's a lot of publicity when the person is found innocent? It gets on the 7th page. Very few people know about it. These guys come out, they probably don't have any wife or husband left. Their jobs are gone, even though they were innocent. You know, the Innocence Project is something that is necessary. And by the way, they don't go out seeking donations. You'll never see something, donate to the Innocence Project. Non-governmental agency that does better work than the government. And I just again want to remind you of one thing. Some of these people have been taken from death row. Today, I used to be all in favor of the death penalty. I had a professor once ask me, can you give me one case where it's been shown that the death penalty deters crime? And I said, yes. He said, what is that? I said, the person that's executed won't commit another crime. Today, I want to see a video of the crime. I want a rabbi, a priest, and a minister to testify that they saw it. I don't want to see people that are innocent, convicted. And yes, I have helped the Innocence Project. I've done research for them. I hope that this has given you something to think about. If I have stirred your mind and you have any questions, I'll give you a chance to ask them. I do have somebody who can help me because my hearing isn't the best. So if anybody has any questions, if you could get those to my friend here and pass them on to me, and I'll answer them.